68%? Oh, that's 90%. I said 68%. We got to get her. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Welcome to Clements Place. Hopefully you came, enjoyed a little bit of the libations. And there's even some more back there. And if you need to take pictures like Mr. Richard is doing now, of course you can do that at any given time. And before, could you hit the lights for a second, Mary? One more. If you like the food or if you didn't like the food, you still got to clap for the chef because the chef showed up. Mr. Chef Dorsey right there. We got the tater salad, which I am a nut job on, so I love the tater salad. And he said he may have some other snacks and whatnot. So thank you, Mr. Chef Dorsey, for coming through. Having a good time with us. All right. So today we're just doing something a little different because you guys are all special. Now, in the old days, special meant something else. But in our new world, we can't say special that way, so I can use special. But you guys come, you're always here, you're always helping out. You're always very much in tune with what's going on. I mean, Mr. Phil Bingham here is like the most regular NJ Pack Jazz Jam person ever. He also runs a thing that I hope you guys, if you ever get a chance to come through, it's called Jesus and Jazz. And we did that over in Millburn. And it's not far from here, so it's like 20 minutes down the road. So if you'll get a chance to come through that, you'll have a good time. Without further ado, tonight what we're going to do, we're going to have like a conversation because for me, I always hear about the movies and who's in the movies and who's there and who's not. So I always want to know what goes on behind the scene, what's in the mind of the movie person. And in this case, we have a cat who was a musician. And then he said, gee, I want to get rich. So he went to the movies. And then he said he didn't like the money, so he came back because he wanted to go to jazz. So we're going to let him give his version of the story, not mine. But what I would like to do is bring the two of them to stage. We're going to turn it over to them, have some conversation with them. You are welcome to move around, do your thing, get some more food. Mr. Don at the bar, he's very nice to everybody, so be nice to him. And with that said, we're going to do some music in the movies. We hope to do a couple of more of these because there's a ton of musicians who have history and a story behind them. So without further ado, let's bring to the stage Mr. Richard Baratta, drummer extraordinaire. And you have to decide which seat you want, whether it's the one on the left or the one on the right. And then we're going to bring to the stage our interviewer, the president of Harlem World magazine. She also runs a lifestyle business called CC Minton's House of Minton Services. And she does a whole bunch of other stuff in real estate and other places, and we'll let her explain that later. So I'd like you to give a little hand to, or a big hand to, Miss CC Minton. So between the two of them, they have a good time running around Newark, New York City, and everywhere else. So with that said, I'm not going to delay anymore. I'm going to turn it over, and let CC and Richard get into the conversation. They've been having some already, but we'll see where else they go. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. How are you?
Hey,
Hello. Good evening.
and by the
Can you
way,
hear me?
can
Oh,
we
there we
hear
go.
it for Gregory Burrus over there, who's put this all together, for sure. Yeah.
Yes, so welcome. I was able to chat with Richard on, I think it was Monday, because I'd never met Richard before. The last person I interviewed, I don't do a lot of interviews anymore, but he was quite interesting, so I decided, yes, I'd like to do this. So the last person I interviewed was comedian, what is his name? Oh, God. Not Richard Pryor. What is his? Kevin Hart. I'm sorry. And so, like I said, Richard is very interesting. He's not a comedian, but of course, he definitely has a life, has lived a life that is very interesting. He started out in music, just like Greg said, and he went to movies because of family, which I really like that. He wanted to make sure he could support his family, and now he's back with us. So I have quite a few questions to ask, okay? And we're going to start with, so Richard, why did you decide to go into movie production versus, say, architecture or law? You know, architecture is a big thing in Poughkeepsie, New York, which is where you're from. What made you decide to go into movies?
Okay, that's a that's a fair question. Greg hit the nail on the head a little bit. I wanted to make some money, and so that was one of the things. But I also was always very interested in film. So when I moved to New York in 1975, I was playing some music, I was doing some recording, I was doing some traveling, but I wasn't making the kind of money that I wanted to make, and I wasn't trying to make a lot of money. I was just trying to make enough money to be comfortable. But it was arduous, and I used to go to the movies. I had a nice loft on 16th Street, and like 1,400 square feet. I think I was paying $400 a month for the loft. I know, it's crazy. And but I didn't have enough money to air condition the place because it was too big a place. So I would go to the movies in the late afternoon when it was the hottest in the summer. And I would go see double features on the Cinema Village. Some of you may remember Cinema Village, and some of you remember St. Mark's Theater and the Thalia. And I would just go see all sorts of repertories and, you know, Hitchcock and Ford and Sturgis and the Truffaut, all the different directors, and I really enjoyed film. Now, my father wanted me to go to law school because he was a district attorney and then a Supreme Court judge in New York. So, you know, I was privileged to have that in my family. He was also a very good piano player, and my mother sang opera. So to transition into music, architecture was never anything for me, really, even though there's some nice architecture in Poughkeepsie. So anyway, I went to a lot of movies, and then all of a sudden, I decided that I really had to do something else. I wanted to get married and move to get a house, and I needed to make money. So that's what I did. And by the way, can I just digress for a moment? I'm sure, I'm a little embarrassed being up here. I mean, I'm honored, but I'm a little embarrassed because all of you have a story that's worth listening to. You know, I just happen to have this opportunity to be able to do it, but there's so many interesting things that have gone on in so many people's lives that, you know, I'm just, you know, I'm giving you a little dissertation on mine, but I'm sure all of you could be up here doing the same thing.
Okay. So the next question I have is, what was it about the drums that made you eventually choose the percussion instrument instead of the saxophone or the flute?
Yeah, that's a good question. My mother used to tell me to play the piano because if you're here at the end of the night and you see how long it takes me to pack the drums up and put them in my car, and same with the percussionist, Paul Rossman, the piano player, he walks in, Bill walks in, maybe he, you know, noodles around a little bit, and when the gig's over, it's, hey, Rich, I'll talk to you soon. And he's on his way out the door. But, you know, same with the bass player. But I chose it because my brother played drums, and, you know, I played a little saxophone, I played a little flute, and I just felt the rhythm, that's all. I was just listening to, when I was 12 years old, I was listening to, you know, John Coltrane and Miles and Dave Brubeck and Buddy Rich and Archie Shepp, and the other people were listening to the Beatles. Now, I was also listening to the Beatles, too, because you couldn't avoid it. But I just gravitated to it. So I guess, you know, the Sicilian blood that I have, which is, you know, like Northern Africa, I've got some rhythm in me.
So I have to ask you a question about what you just said. So I know you have a BA in history, right?
Correct.
How did you learn to play the drums? Like, how did that come about?
Oh, well, I also have a doctorate, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, an honorary doctorate. Yeah, I couldn't earn a doctorate. Get that idea. That was just bestowed upon me. for serendipity on that one. But no, I just always liked tapping on things. I think you walk down the street, there's a rhythm going on. You feel it in your head. You feel it in your body. It always made sense to me. That's all.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay, tell me. No, I'm going to skip that one. I know family is important to you. Has music or movies had an impact on your children in any way, or have any of your children followed in your footsteps with music or movies?
Okay, so when I got into the film business in 1984, my first film was Desperately Seeking Susan, and with Madonna. And at that point, I stopped playing music. I mean, it was cold turkey. I really stopped. I mean, I went out and heard a lot of music. I went out and heard the musicians that I'm playing with here tonight, actually. They didn't know me, but I was a fan of theirs and a fan of the
They know you now.
They do know me now because I pay them. That's why they know me. But anyway, not well, but I pay them. So I just stopped. I stopped playing music, and I was really immersed myself into film. And with my family, I have 3 kids, a daughter and 2 sons. And on Sundays, we try to watch a movie on Sundays. When they got old enough to watch the movies. And I tried to make like Sunday a movie day, and they really enjoyed it. So my oldest, my daughter, and my youngest, my son, are both in the film business. Both are writers, and my youngest wrote and directed a film a couple of years ago, and we're trying to sell it now. So yeah, they got into it. They were influenced by it because they were around it all the time. And I also, through the connections that I had as a movie producer, I was able to get them on, jobs on the movie. I mean, hey, it happens. Nepotism happens, right? We all know that. So I took advantage of that, and they were hard workers. I was hard on them, but they learned the business. So yeah, it rubbed off. But no musicians. They didn't play music, although my son's playing piano now, which is good.
So I have to ask this question. When did they realize that you weren't just dad?
I don't think they've figured that out yet either. I mean, that's yeah. No, we have a great relationship, but your parents are your parents. It could be the president of the United States, but we won't even go there. But you could be, and your parents would still say, "Can you loan me $20?" So there you go.
Okay, so back to Desperately Seeking Susan. What role did you play in the production of that film? And what type of impact did it have on your film career? Because I think that was one of the first, was it the first or the? So that must have had a tremendous impact on many different levels, personally, professionally, I would think.
Yeah, it did, but not the way you would think it would, because I was 34 when I worked on that movie, and most of the people that were in the positions, the lower level positions, PAs, location scouts, they were a lot younger. They were in their 20s. So I was considered fairly old for a PA, first movie that I've ever worked on, and I still had that love of music, and I used to go to work in the morning at 4:00 in the morning to be on the set to make sure the campers came in, because I was a location scout assistant. And I remember seeing musicians coming home from, because Desperately Seeking Susan shot on the Lower East Side. That's with Madonna and Roseanne Arquette. And the Tin Palace was down there, and the Village Gate was down there, and you had a bunch of clubs in both the villages. And I would see musicians coming home from the gigs when I was getting up in the morning. And it was hard for me. It was a major adjustment to get up that early in the morning. And I didn't have that much responsibility. So when the movie ended, I didn't want to make movies anymore. No, I was like, it was, what am I doing? I'm just running around doing things. But that's how you got to do it. You got to start at the bottom. So I was sitting home. I remember after the movie ended, don't get me wrong, there were some things about it that were fun. Right. Okay, but I didn't know enough about the business. I never went to film school. So when I got home, after the movie ended, I remember I was watching a Monday night football game with some friends, and the phone rang, and somebody asked me, they said, hey, we heard you're a good scout or something, and we'd like to know if you want to work on this Brian De Palma film. It's only 2 weeks, just 2 weeks. We need a scout. And I know that I got paid $40 a day on, yeah, right, 1984, $40 a day, and I got $20 for my car. So I was making $60 a day, $300 a week, which was okay, you know, back then. My rent was $400. So, but that wasn't enough. And I said, well, what are you paying? And they said, $60 a day. And I went, oh, wow, that's a raise right there. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So I did 2 weeks. And then I got done, and then I got a phone call, and somebody said, hey, we heard you were scouting on, because word travels within the industry, and I'm responsible. And they said, you want to work on this Mike Nichols film? And I said, well, yeah, I guess so, but what's it pay? And they said, $80 a day. And I said, oh, well, that's pretty good. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And $25 for the car. So I was making a little more money. And, you know, for the next 4 movies, I kept moving up. And then finally, I kind of got hooked because, and the reason I got hooked is because I was given a lot of responsibility. I became a location manager. So I was in charge of things, and I made decisions, and I had creative input on the locations. And then it became more worthwhile, you know. So it became something that was attractive to me that way. So I just worked my way up and got into the Directors Guild, and then that was a whole different thing. And then I became a producer, and the rest is history. Yeah.
So I do have a question. So I know with your children, you were able to, you know, guide them and present them with some opportunities. How did you get the opportunity? I mean, you weren't from LA.
Nope.
You didn't have a film background. Nope. How did you make that initial?
Well, I think like everything in life, you make contacts, and you meet as many people as you can. And I met, I used to play baseball, all right? I played some baseball in college. And I got into a softball league in Central Park, okay, a fast-pitch softball league. And one of the guys that was on the team was a production manager for Woody Allen. And he was a real good player, and I was, you know, we were on the team, and we had a real good team, and we became friends. And then he needed a place to live, and somebody moved out of the loft next door to me. And he moved in next door, so he would come and hear me play music, and I would go to the movie sets. And, you know, he realized that you know, I was interested in film, and he knew I was responsible because I was coaching the baseball team. And I was very good about getting hold of people and telling them when the games were and where they were, and, you know, it was all buttoned up. So he thought, and I kept saying, hey, I'd like to get into the film business. I don't want to play music anymore. So he took a shot on me and introduced me to somebody, and then one thing led to the other. And I think the most important thing is, I mean, there are no really young people here today. No offense, but, you know, and that's just the way it is. I mean, you know, so it's okay. No, listen, it's a good thing. We're here. That's the most important thing. We're old and we're here. So my message to the young people would be, if they're here, is, you know, you got to work hard. You got to work hard, and you got to be responsible, and you can move up. That's all. It's just the way life is.
Okay, I'll skip that question because that's about Madonna, but I won't ask that right now. Overall, what movie was most memorable to you? You know, of the movies that you were a part of in production.
Okay, that's a difficult.
Because you have what? You have Superman, The Joker, The Irishman. 5 Spider-Man movies, yeah. Right? Yeah. So
no Superman, but Spider-Man.
I meant Spider-Man.
And Spider-Man can take Superman. You know that. You know that. Boo! All right, we got Superman can take Spider-Man. Okay, whatever. It's not worth fighting over. All right. You know, I worked on a lot of real. I was very, very fortunate. Very fortunate. I worked on a lot of movies. I worked on movies with Mike Nichols, and I worked on movies with Sidney Pollack and Marty Scorsese and Tony Scott. A lot of good people, and I learned a lot from all of them. Mostly things to do and some things not to do. But I don't know. I mean, there were, Donnie Brasco was a great film. That was a real good film to work on. Across the Universe was a wonderful film. It was so difficult. It was a musical. The Joker was real good. I'm proud of a lot of the movies that I worked on. Okay. Yeah.
So in the 80s, you played with Hal Galper, yeah. Peter Barbara, Johnny Hartman, and the Marvelettes, and more. Who was your favorite to play with, and why, of those that I mentioned?
Of those that you mentioned?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I didn't tell you that, right?
Who was the last one you mentioned?
Let's see. The Marvelettes.
No. So, although that was fun for as briefly as it was, I listen. Playing with Hal Galper was great. He's a great piano player. Playing with so many people. John Stubblefield was another guy that I really enjoyed playing with. I had a I had a set with Hank Mobley, and if you know who Hank Mobley was, he played with Miles Davis. So I had a set with him, and Johnny Hartman was nice, but I mean, I played brushes. There wasn't much else that I did. Everything was about. So there are not too many people that I've played with that I really haven't enjoyed playing with, especially the people I'm playing with tonight.
So can you tell me more about the Gotham City Latin Jazz Septet and the 3Bs plus 2? Yeah. So when I came back, when I started playing music again in 2017, I had one gig in 2016. It was a fortuitous event. I was shooting Irishmen out in Kaufman Astoria Studios in Queens, and I was asked to go take a look at the commissary. In Kaufman Astoria Studios, there's a commissary downstairs that used to support movies from the 20s. So Mae West and W.C. Fields and the Marx Brothers and Loretta Young and with Rudolph Valentino, they all worked out there, and they ate in the commissary. So the commissary went through different iterations. It was a club, and then it became a cafeteria, and then it became a dressing room, and many things. So when it turned into a club, like a cabaret club, I was asked to go downstairs and see if I could help figure out how to set the place up, because they knew I played music, but I wasn't playing music. I was just doing movies. So I went down and I looked, and I gave them some ideas. I said, but you got to do me one favor. I said, for this information, you got to let me come in with a group. They said, sure, you can come in with a group. So the first group I went in with was just a trio with Emmett Cohen and Russell Hall. And then, I don't know, a month later, 3 weeks later, I went in with Mike Ladon and Paul Bollenback on guitar. He's here tonight. And he played there. And then I was playing there a couple of times a week. And then Bill O'Connell, the pianist, he played with me there. And Mike Goetz, the bassist, and Paul. And Craig never played with me there because I didn't know Craig yet. But so many people played with me there. And I was playing there 2-3 times a month. And I was learning to play music again. So I decided to have a septet, and I called it the Gotham City Latin Jazz Septet because Bill he's got deep roots in Latin music, and we used to play a lot of his tunes. And everybody else fit right in, and Vincent Herring was with that band as well as Paul. So we just started playing, and I started getting a number of gigs. And since 2017, we've recorded 3 or 4 records, CDs, and we played a lot of gigs. And I'm hoping
I'm hoping to go out on tour with a band. You know, it's hard to take 7 people, 6, 7 people. I don't know, but we're going to see what we can do. But that was the inception of that. It just became something, and it became fun, and we all get along. And the 3 Bs is just Bollenback, Baratta, and Bianchi, who's an organ player, okay, and then +2, whoever is available, whether it's Craig or Vincent or somebody else, and Paul plays with us, Paul Rossman back there. So that was 3 Bs +2. So they're the 2 main groups that I have been playing with, although I do a lot of trio work and a lot of other stuff.
So I have to, this is a personal question before I open it up to the guests. So what was it like? I used to be a big Madonna fan years ago. She's very different now. But what was it like working with Madonna, like on set? What was she like?
Well, we went out during that movie. No, we didn't. We didn't. All right. So I'm only kidding. Okay. That's not true. That's not true. I really didn't want to go out with her. That's no. What was it like? Listen, she wasn't a big star then. She was just starting off, and she was really pleasant. She was super, super pleasant, and you know, she wasn't the star of the film. The star of the film was Rosanna Arquette, but as soon as we started filming, crowds would form around Madonna's trailer, and not around Rosanna's trailer, and that was a little bit of a touchy, you know, situation. But she was, yeah, she was fine. You know, I don't know anything about her now, but she was like. There are not too many people that I've worked with that haven't been really nice people. Right. Really, they really are. I mean, I don't know what they do in their private life, but you know, they're very nice people.
Inquiring minds would want to know, but no, I'm only joking.
That's okay.
So, boy, you have a very, I don't want to say historical, but very interesting background, and I love how you you just kind of went from music to film, and it feels effortless to me, but I'm sure it may not feel that way to you.
It's not effortless for sure. It's not. It's a lot of work. Both of them were a lot of work, but both of them are also super gratifying, you know. So I just feel really blessed and fortunate to be able to have had that opportunity to have a film career and produce so many really good movies, and then come back to the thing that I loved more than anything, which was the Knicks. No, music. I'm sorry. And by the way, hey, nobody's allowed to say what the score is. I'm taping this game tonight, okay? So I'm going to go home and watch it. So please, don't even tell. So I feel extremely fortunate to be able to get back into music and have some successful recordings that I've done and continue to play and, you know, knock on wood, stay healthy. And I just love the guys that I play with. I really do. And we love hanging together. I think, you know, I'm speaking for them. They can come up and say whatever they want. But no, I really enjoy it, and it's been a nice ride, and I'm learning things all the time, musically. Yeah.
So I think this is a great time to take questions from the audience. Do we have any drummers here? People who are interested in music? Just any questions, because Richard has a very, very exciting background, and it looks like you're moving forward in an exciting way also. Okay.
Yes. Sure.
How did you keep your chops up during these changes?
He asked me, how did I keep my chops up? You mean during those 35 years away? I didn't. No, I really didn't play. I'd go down in the basement once in a while. You know, if I was in between movies or it was a weekend, you know, I'd smoke a joint and maybe go downstairs and play, you know, the drums and you know, it would be cool. You know, I mean, you know, whatever. But I didn't, I had maybe 1 gig a year in 20 of those years. Somebody would call me, and if it wasn't somebody really seriously good, I would take the gig because I wouldn't go out and embarrass myself or them. So, but when I came back, I had an opportunity to play like 100 gigs, like over a 2-3 year period, that got me up to where I am, which is very far from where I want to be, but you are where you are. That's all you can be. Anybody else?
Any other questions? Philip is a drummer, so I figured you would have a question.
So I know you said that you like Buddy Rich. Who are your other favorite drummers?
Who were my favorite drummers? Okay. I'll give you my influences. Okay. When I was growing up, Elvin was a big influence. Elvin Jones, and Art Blakey was an influence. Yeah, and then as I got and there's so many great drummers. I mean, Buddy Rich was, so Buddy, and then I got into Tony Williams and Jack DeJohnette, and those guys were kind of my favorite guys, and Roy Haynes, and now there's hundreds of them. There really are. There's so many good drummers. You're probably one of my favorites as well, if I heard you play.
Okay, let's do one more question, I think. Greg, how are we doing? I know you.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a good question. Do I miss working in the film industry? I do, but I don't miss it enough to go do it. Okay? Because when I was doing it, you have to realize it was, when we're filming, which is anywhere from 10 weeks to 20 weeks, depending on what the film is, I'm up at 5 in the morning, and I'm home at 9 o'clock at night. It's long days, 14, 15, 16 hours, and it's, there's a lot of pressure. You have to manage the money, and you have to deal with the actors, and you have to deal with all the problems, and so it's stressful. But I didn't mean to yell. But it's also really gratifying because you're building something. You see it every day. You film it, and then you look at it, and you see what it is. It's like building a house. You see it go up, and it's gratifying. And also, when you're in charge of something, it's like, when you're the boss, it's a nice position to be in, right? It's good to be the king. I was never the king, all right? The king was the director, but it's good to be in the castle. So I was kind of in the castle, and that's a nice thing. And I spent a lot of time doing it and got paid well, and have a pension, and it's it worked out, and now I'm playing music.
So, before we leave, can I get your autograph? Is that okay?
You can, but I don't know why you would want it. Wait, we have another question. We have
Another one? Okay.
When did you decide to just say enough is enough? I don't know if it was asked, but you transitioned back to being a musician. When did you stop the film industry? One day you woke up and said, this is it?
I was working. So, did everybody hear the question? Yeah. Okay. So I was gradually getting to the point where I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to play music. Music wasn't in my mind. I just knew I just didn't want to do it. I wanted to. It was a lot of hours, And my youngest son was a very good baseball player in college, and he tried out for the Mets and the Brewers, and he didn't make it. But I was spending so much time dealing with the sports, so throwing batting practice, going to all the college games, sneaking out of work, going to, whatever I had to do to see that. So I was reaching the point where I had spent 35 years doing it. And when I was working on Irishman, I told the production team, I said, this is it. This is the last one. They went, no way, you're not leaving. And I said, yeah, I'm leaving, I'm done. And they said, no, you can't leave. And I said, I'm going to leave. And then that same group of people, the producer, good friend of mine, Emma, who had worked with Marty Scorsese for years, said, we got another picture, you got to do it. I said, what's the picture? She said, The Joker. And I said, no, I don't want to do it. And they said, come on, you got to do it. It's with Todd Phillips. And Todd Phillips had a reputation not being a nice guy, And that's okay. If he were here, I would say that. I said, I don't want to work. You know, if I'm going to do something, I want to have a good time doing it. And she said, no, he's a good guy. You got to meet him. So I met him. And he was funny he was super funny, super bright guy and funny. Right. And he continued to be, so I decided, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it. I don't care what happens. If it fails, if I do a horrible job, if I get lazy, whatever happens, if I get fired, I don't care. I'm done anyway. So there was no pressure on me to do it. And as it turned out, he and I got along and argued a lot. All right? So he was funny, but he could also be a buster, too. He was tough, but I didn't really care. And he knew that, so we would laugh about that. He said, Baratta, what am I going to do? I can't fire you. You want to get fired, so you're staying. He said, so you're staying. You're staying on the gig, and I'm going to torture you. And I said, okay, fine. I don't care. Do whatever you want. And so that movie turned out to be, Academy Award nominated. But I said, that's it. Because Joker 2, which I'm very happy not to have agreed to do, okay, because I didn't think it was any good. I turned that down. But, okay, and this will probably end it. We'll probably play music after this. My son wrote and directed a movie in 2022, so I produced that movie with him. So if my kids, either my daughter or my son, write and get money to do a picture, I will do that with them. Because, those are your kids. So I'll go back for that. But otherwise, I just want to play some music and spread some enjoyment and love for you people out there that have come out to hear it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey, your story, all that good stuff. And if I have any other questions, I'll text you or email you.
You can do
but,
that.
thank everyone for participating and asking great questions. And I'm pretty sure Mr. Burrus would like for me to turn the mic over to him. He's giving me the side eye. So.
And thank you, CC. I'll give him my mic if you want. It's right here. Thank you to her for moderating this and asking the questions.
Mr. Richard, whenever they have the movie, this is a really off-base question. Whenever they have the movies like they're doing down the corner, there's always this fantastic food set up outside the movies. Is anybody actually watching those things? Little kids, we used to sneak in there all the time.
Well, the answer to that question is, we spend an awful lot of money on caterers, an awful lot of money. And, you can't watch everybody, and people do come up and steal food, and sometimes you just let them steal food. If they're that hungry, what are you going to do? But, the food's real good.
The other question, what's the most exotic place your movie career took you to, besides Newark?
I did shoot here a couple of times in Newark.
Right. Oh, yeah.
The most exotic place that I shot in. You mean like the hotel room with naked women with Leonardo DiCaprio? Is that an exotic? That wasn't. That was the location wasn't exotic. Well, I don't know. Liverpool. I was in Liverpool and across the universe. That's nice. It's not super exotic, but and I've been to the islands. Staten Island? No, not Staten Island. Jamaica was nice. I had a good time down in Jamaica with Bill Murray, and there's a funny guy. I stayed, Greg, I stayed mostly in New York because I had a family, and I wanted to be with my family. I didn't want my wife to be alone taking care of the kids. I didn't think that was fair. And I was really into sports, and so were all my kids. And I wanted to be there because my feeling was, and I'm not making any judgment here, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. And if I was away, I know I'd be paying the price now, So I wanted to be there. So that was the reason for that.
Thank you. Let's give him a hand. Thank you, CC Minton. She is the sitting president of Harlem World Magazine. Has this huge readership, so if you get a chance, go online, harlemworldmagazine.com. You can look it up somewhere in there or bug me and I'll send you a picture of her hanging out with the people all over the place. And Mr. Richard Baratta here, thank you, thank you, thank you. Now we're going to take a break, grab some food, bug Don. We do have donations, QR code on the TV screen whenever it comes up, or just talk to each other. But thank you all for coming out early and enjoying it with us. And we're going to start the music in like 15 minutes. We're going to cook. Thank you. Did we get the lights? 72% lower than they are now? Doop, 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 doop. We have the most exotic lighting system ever. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at part 2 of the evening. We're going to have some really fabulous music. Before we kick them off, I just want to say that tomorrow we have saxophonist Alex Des Riveras will be coming through, and he'll have his quartet with him. And then on Friday, we have Peter Lynn doing the AAPI Jazz Fest team. He'll have some music coming through on Friday, so we'll be here Thursday and Friday. Other than that, the guys look like they're ready. Thank you for hanging out, enjoying some libations with us, and getting ready to swing. Turn it over to Mr. Richard Baratta Sextet.
Thank you. That was a movie tune. That's one of the ones we did early on, the first recording we did, which is music and film, The Real Deal. Luck Be a Lady, that Frank Sinatra movie. We're going to follow it up with something off the latest recording we did, which is called Looking Back, and it's all rock tunes from the 60s. These tunes were all arranged by our pianist, the great Bill O'Connell over there on piano. Yep. And this is his arrangement and our playing of Lucy in the Sky, a Beatles tune. How's that for an arrangement by Bill O'Connell? There you go. Lucy in the Sky. We're going to follow that up with another one off that recording. And by the way, if you do have a CD player and you would like to purchase a CD, they are back there. So just see Greg or somebody back there, and we're almost giving them away. So go on. Is it too far away from Christmas to get ready for Christmas stuffing? No, not at all. I didn't think so. Anyway, here's another, actually, back to back, 2 Beatles tunes. We've never played this one live. We recorded this almost a year ago, and it's been in the book, and tonight we're taking it out of the book. So this is Eleanor Rigby. I hope I remember how it goes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Eleanor Rigby. We're gonna follow it up. How's the sound out there? Is it good? Yeah, good. Beautiful. Okay, we're gonna switch gears a little bit here. This is nothing off one of our recordings. This is a tune that I really used to listen to quite a bit in the 70s from an Elvin Jones recording called Merry Go Round. And this is a tune by Dave Liebman, and Gene Perola's on it, and what's his name? Grossman, Steve Grossman, and Jan Hammer. So we're gonna play this tune. It's called A Bright Piece. It's got a little intro 2 times, and at the end we got a 1-time out. And I guess Bill and I will conduct it. I mean, one of us will. Anyway, here it is, A Bright Piece. called A Bright Peace. That's the first time we played that together. Yep. That's a nice tune. Here's a tune off of our the last one that we did, Looking Back. This is a tune that I know a lot of you know this tune. All right, I kept bugging Bill to write an arrangement for this tune, and finally he acquiesced. He gave up. I was bugging him too much, and it's a tune by the great songwriter, famous Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. Wooly Bully. Wooly Bully. And this is our version of that tune. a little Woolly Bully. Okay. Well, we got a couple of more tunes, I guess. Would you like to do a ballad? All right, let's do Pure Imagination. How's that? We're gonna do a tune from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. This is another one that's off the recording that we did, the second one, Music and Film, the sequel, which is also back there. And beautiful tune from Willy Wonka. I think it's number 17 in your scorebook there. And here we go, Pure Imagination. That's a pretty tune. Craig Handy on saxophone. Let's hear it for Craig Handy. Craig Handy on saxophone. Paul Bollenback on guitar. Yes, indeed. Paul Rossman on percussion. Michael Goetz on bass. Yeah, there you go, Mike. Bill O'Connell on piano, and yours truly, Richard Baratta on drums. We're going to play a tune that we haven't played before. Let's play You Can't Always Get What You Want. We're going to play a tune by the Rolling Stones. How's that? Okay? You don't hear too many tunes from the Rolling Stones here, do you, Greg? Is Greg here? No, you don't hear it. So, well, we're gonna treat you to one. You can't always get what you want. There you go. You can't always get what you want. I guess we're just going to close with one more tune. Make it a quick one here. We've been going for a long time here. One more, Craig. Is that Greg? Okay. Hey, you want to do a little respect, a little Aretha Franklin? Let's end with Aretha Franklin, right? Why not? Yeah, we're going to play, Respect. Okay. Once again, this is on the Looking Back recording. Still on those charts. We're still up there. This is our 10th week or 11th week in the top 10, or we were 12. So it's nice to know.
solo? Okay. Piano fusion. Two of us. Okay. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's it for those of you that stayed. Thank you very much. Not too many out there, but I'm telling you, thank you for coming. Way to go, Craig. I like you blowing on the end of that tune. Craig Handy, Paul Bollenback, Paul Rossman, Michael Goetz, Bill O'Connell, Richard Baratta, thank you for coming out. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard Baratta and the Sextet. Thank you very much. We'll be back tomorrow, Alex Des Riveras, and Friday with the AAP IJS Collective. Thank you. Get home safe.